There was a time when the world did not fear us, when we were not the hunters, but the hunted. We moved through the shadows, always listening for the growl in the dark, the snap of a branch that meant something stronger, faster, and far more deadly had found our trail. The great cats ruled the grasslands. Bears taller than 2 men owned the caves, and in the frozen north, even the wind felt like an enemy. But then, everything changed. It happened on a plain of endless ice, beneath a sky the color of dull steel. The air was a blade, cutting every breath short. Out there, a wounded giant stumbled, a mammoth, its fur heavy with frost, its blood steaming in the cold. Behind it, 6 shapes closed in. Wrapped in the hides of wolves and reindeer, their faces marked with ash and ochre, they moved as one. No words, only the silent language of killers. They had tracked this beast for days, across frozen rivers, through nights so dark the stars themselves seemed afraid to shine. And now, the giant faltered. The leader raised his spear. It cut the air with a hiss, and the world began to turn in our favor. Because in that moment, humans stopped running. And from that day forward, everything else would run from us.
There was nothing inevitable about our rise. 300,000 years ago, we were scattered bands of upright apes clinging to survival in a world built for predators far deadlier than us. Our bodies were soft, slow, and fragile. We had no claws to tear, no fangs to pierce, no natural armor to protect. Even our young were born helpless, their cries carrying into the night like signals to whatever prowled beyond the firelight. In those days, the savannas of Africa, the forests of Europe, and the plains of Asia belonged to others. Lions, larger and more powerful than those you know today, stalked the grasslands in prides that could bring down anything on 4 legs, or 2. Saber-toothed cats waited in the shadows, their canines like twin daggers built to punch through bone. Packs of giant hyenas could strip a carcass to nothing in minutes. And if you sought shelter in the mountains, there were bears taller than any man, stronger than any weapon you could carry. And it wasn't only the beasts. Other humans walked the earth, Neanderthals with bodies thick as tree trunks, their arms built for crushing blows. Denisovans, mysterious and hardy, claimed territories we barely understood. These were not our enemies in the way lions and hyenas were, but they were rivals for land, food, and safety. When the world turned cold, those rivals could be as dangerous as any predator's claws. The Ice Age was merciless. The wind cut through skin and bone alike, and winter could stretch for months without relief. Herds of reindeer, bison, and mammoth migrated across the steppe, carrying with them the only true wealth of the frozen world: meat, hide, bone, sinew. If you failed to follow the herds, you starved. But following meant facing the other hunters that stalked them: wolves with eyes like frozen moons, cave lions with paws the size of shields, entire packs of humans who would kill for a single haunch of meat. In this world, survival was not a given. It was stolen. What set us apart was not our bodies, but something far more dangerous: our minds. At first, the difference was small. We learned to shape stone, to chip away at flint until it could pierce hide or cut flesh. We learned to control fire, to use it not just for warmth, but as a weapon that could blind the night and keep predators at bay. Then we learned something that no other predator had mastered: to hunt together, not by instinct, but by plan. Our kills were no longer accidents of luck. They were designed. We learned to read the land, to see in the bent grass and the churned soil the path an animal had taken. We learned patience, to stalk for hours or days without revealing ourselves. And when we struck, we did it as one, each person a piece of a single deadly machine. The first time we brought down something larger than ourselves, it must have felt like touching lightning. That power was intoxicating. But it was not enough to kill. We had to kill consistently. The climate forced our hand. When winters deepened and the herds grew scarce, our survival demanded bolder hunts. small prey could no longer feed a growing band. We began targeting giants, animals that could feed us for weeks, clothe us for months, arm us with bone and sinew for seasons to come. And the more we hunted them, the better we became at it. Bit by bit, kill by kill, the balance shifted. The lions and saber-tooths that once claimed our kills began to give way when we approached. The wolves hung back at the edge of the firelight. Even the Neanderthals, once supreme in their strongholds, found us pressing into their lands. We were not yet the masters of the earth. But the world was beginning to notice that something had changed. Something small and soft and slow had found a way to be feared. And once that door opened, it would never close again. The mammoth's breath rose in thick clouds, drifting into the gray air like smoke from a dying fire. Each step it took left a crater in the snow, the edges crusted with frozen blood. It moved slower now, each movement a tremor of exhaustion. The hunters knew this moment would come. They had counted on it. They had driven the giant for days, not with constant attack, but with calculated harassment. A spear hurled from the shadows. A sudden rush to force it toward the open plain. Always enough to wound, never enough to kill outright. The goal was not speed, but where. Make the muscles ache. Let the blood seep. Sap its strength until it could no longer defend itself. This was persistence hunting, but on a scale few animals could endure. The mammoth's size was both its greatest power and its fatal weakness. It could kill any one of them with a swing of its head, but it could not escape a hunt measured in days instead of moments. Humans had patience. Humans could read the land. And humans could run an animal into the ground without ever having to match its speed. The leader moved first. He circled wide, cutting across the mammoth's path. The others fanned out, each holding the position agreed upon long before they ever saw the animal. Their movements were the result of quiet planning around a fire the night before, tracing paths in the dirt, memorizing signals, assigning each hunter a role. A young woman crouched low, her breath steady. She waited until the beast's great head swung toward the leader. Then she sprang forward, launching her spear. It struck high, just behind the rib. The mammoth bellowed, rearing back. That sound rolled across the plain, deep enough to shake the snow from nearby pines. But the hunters did not flinch. Another spear flew. And another. Each found its mark. Stone tips split hide, fire-hardened shafts bit into muscle. The giant staggered, its great tusks scraping the frozen ground. They closed in. Step by step. The final blow came from the leader, his spear driven deep into the chest where the heart thundered like a drum. The beast shuddered once, twice, then fell to its knees. A moment later, the plain was silent except for the slow hiss of its dying breath. It was over. But this was more than a hunt. Archaeologists would one day find sites like this across the frozen world, Dolny Vestinus in the Czech lands, where piles of mammoth bones spoke of repeated, organized kills, Baralek in Siberia, where the remains of over 100 mammoths lay clustered as if herded to slaughter. These were not random victories. They were evidence of a strategy, proof that humans had mastered the art of bringing down the greatest creatures of the Ice Age. And each kill like this carried a message. To wolves, to lions, to other humans, the days of our fear were ending. The age of our reign had begun. The silence after the kill was unlike any other. No more trumpeting calls, no drumbeat of hooves against the frozen ground. Only the soft hiss of wind over snow and the faint crackle of ice shifting beneath the weight of a fallen giant. The mammoth lay still, steam rising from its wounds, curling into the gray air like a final spirit leaving its body. The hunters stood in a loose circle around it, chests heaving from exertion, hands trembling not from fear, but from the rush of what they had just done. No predator in living memory had felled such a beast. But here it was, lifeless before them. The work began immediately. Knives of flint and obsidian cut through the thick hide. The first incision released a wave of heat and a smell, rich, metallic, and heavy with life. Red steam poured into the cold. They worked in silence except for the occasional grunt as a bone was cracked, a tendon cut, or a slab of meat heaved free. Every part would be taken. The hides, thick as shields, would be stretched and dried for tents and cloaks. The ribs could become roof supports for shelters. The tusks would be shaped into weapons, tools, and ornaments that spoke of power. The sinews would be turned into bowstrings and thread. By the time the sun began to fade, the plain was no longer white. It was stained with the work of survival. Wolves appeared on the horizon, their shape small and uncertain against the snow. They did not come closer. Not yet. They had learned the scent of human kills, and the danger that came with it. When the butchering was done, the hunters built a fire in the shadow of the carcass. Fat dripped into the flames, hissing and spitting as the first meat roasted. Children, brought forward from where they had waited at a safe distance, were given the choicest pieces, tender and warm. The elders took their share, speaking softly of the hunt, of the courage shown, of the memory of this day. There was more here than food. This was a statement. To every predator that watched from the tree line, to every rival band that might hear the story, to the sky itself, humans were no longer a fragile species clinging to life. They were becoming something else. Something that could strip the greatest beasts from the earth and leave nothing but bones. That night, as the firelight danced against the snow, the hunters slept knowing that they had done more than feed their people. They had taken another step toward a new order in the world. And once a species tastes that kind of power, it does not give it back. The mammoth's body would be gone within days, eaten, dried, stored, or fashioned into tools. The blood would fade from the snow, the prints would fill with drifting ice, and the plain would look empty again. But the meaning of that hunt would remain, etched in the minds of those who witnessed it. This was more than survival. This was transformation. A line had been crossed. One that no other species in history had ever stepped over. Before, humans had lived in the margins, adapting to what the world allowed. Now, they were bending the world to fit their needs. They had learned to break the strongest, outlast the fastest, and claim the kills that once belonged to the most fearsome predators. From this moment on, the change spread like fire. In the frozen north, mammoths and bison fell in numbers that could feed whole tribes through the dark season. In the forests, deer and elk were hunted with silent coordination that rivaled the stealth of wolves. On the savannas, humans learned to drive entire herds into traps and over cliffs, turning the land itself into a weapon. The earth was taking note. Where humans moved, the great predators moved back. Their territories shrank. Their numbers thinned. Some vanished altogether. It was not the teeth or claws of humans that made this happen, but the mind. The ability to imagine, to plan, to act together with a single purpose. The Ice Age would one day thaw, but the shift that began here would never reverse. Humanity had become something new, a force that no predator could rival, no prey could escape. The reign of claws and fangs had ended. The reign of thought, strategy, and will had begun. And from that day forward, the most dangerous predator on Earth walked on two legs. If you think this was brutal, you haven't heard the worst of it. Because there were times when the prey wasn't an animal at all. Times when the hunt turned inward, when humans stalked and killed their own, not for food, but for power, fear, and belief. The Ice Age may have forged us into predators, but what came next revealed just how far we would go once nothing could stand in our way. Like, subscribe, and share, because the next prehistoric story will leave you speechless, and once you know it, you'll never look at humanity the same way again.